What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh. We got Jays Jumpers, Jaron Jackson Jr.'s, John Morant's, Joe Johnson's, Ja Raff's, of course. We've got Jays We Got 'Em for Days. Josh, how you doing?
First, would you like to join me in personally thanking the 38 AP voters who kept Purdue number one?
I was texting with somebody this morning. I would love to talk to the 22 people who picked Houston and get their explanation as to why.
What about the two people that picked Alabama and Arizona, respectively?
I don't have any interest in talking to people with that little intelligence and logic. So I'll just talk to the 22 people that had Houston. I don't
Fair
have
enough.
any interest in talking to the other people though. That's a waste of time. That's people trying too hard.
Agreed.
Completely. Because and all 24 of those people can't come up with a reason that I have any respect for.
That's
Zero.
probably right. Yeah.
Just you can't go from unanimous number one and lose by 5 at a top 20 team and maybe the hardest place to play in the country right now when it's rocking.
Yeah.
And then lose the respect of 22 people when Houston beat like Wichita State and Temple last week.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you. We addressed this, so I wanted to bring it back up full circle because we saw this coming beforehand. At least they're still number one. Second, I'm becoming and I'm curious for your thoughts on this. We're in this weird space where there are, these other top 15 matchups to talk about, and number one lost, so we're not going to get to dive into Duke, North Carolina too much. I'm getting real interested in Derek Lively as an NBA prospect because what he did in that game is incredibly valuable without scoring the basketball. That dude just dominated the area right underneath the basket. I mean, what was it? 8 blocks. I'm getting very curious because these Duke guys just, for a variety of reasons, it just hasn't happened for this freshman class. But he won them that game. He didn't do anything offensively. I think he had 4 points. One of them was a dunk and one of them was a putback dunk off an offensive rebound, if I remember correctly. But I want that dude on my team because that dude is one of the few players he's built to play in today's NBA outside of the offensive limitations and the fact he can't stretch the floor. But just watching that game, I'm fascinated if somebody's going to look at him and say kind of the same James Wiseman thing of, that dude's athletic enough to hang defensively, look at what he can do, or is it the offensive limitations are too much? I'm becoming intrigued by this. This is going to be something I want to follow all the way through the draft.
With all due respect, you just said he has an NBA ready game and then pointed to the two things that everybody will have on their list why he's not NBA ready.
Right.
He was super impressive. And, of course, this is the type of conversation that comes as a result. But that, he's not good enough offensively to be drafted high. He's just not.
Right, which is where you can look at that and say he can do that in the NBA, right? My thing is, how valuable is that? Because that's probably all you're getting. Yeah.
And it's not valuable. It's just not. It's the same reason why, Zach Edey, yeah, he's 7'4", but there are obvious reasons why he lacks NBA value. And James Wiseman going as poorly as it has gone is a bad thing for Derek Lively.
Right, exactly.
Bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you're depending on him to basically be elite defensively, because if he's not worth my pick.
Right, exactly.
And James Wiseman went from that guy can be elite defensively to that dude is lost defensively in the NBA. And even a guy like Evan Mobley, who immediately became a defensive anchor on an NBA team the minute he stepped onto an NBA floor, still people can't have a conversation about him without saying, man, but if he really starts to develop a consistent 3-point shot, then he's really scary. You can't even have a conversation about Mobley. And expecting Lively to be as good as Mobley defensively is just unfair.
Yeah.
So, do I wish that a guy like Lively and, to a further extent, we'll get to these two guys, but guys like Edey and guys like Trace Jackson Davis had more NBA value? Yeah, but I also understand why they don't.
Yeah.
And it's it's a dangerous game to draft a guy who you're only convinced can be elite at can be really good at one thing in the
Yep.
NBA, because if he's not, then you have nothing to fall back on,
And
right? I mean,
especially when that thing is not shooting.
right. I mean, Marcus Smart was not drafted 5th overall or whatever it was to be a defensive
No.
player of the year, right? I
Yeah.
mean, sometimes those things happen, but that's not. I mean, if you'd have told the Celtics, did he get drafted by the Celtics or did he get traded to the Celtics?
I believe the Celtics drafted him.
I think he got drafted by the Celtics. Anyway, but if you told the Celtics that what you were going to get out of Marcus Smart more than anything is just a backcourt defender, they probably wouldn't have drafted him 5th overall, which is unfortunate. But he was spectacular. It was the best I'd seen, and Filipowski's had a spectacular year, and that was still the best I'd seen a Duke player look at his position and the thing he does the best all season. He was super elite in that game.
6th overall to the Celtics.
6th overall to the Celtics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just because I'm with you on all of this, right? I don't see any way in which he's a lottery pick. I'm just fascinated by what is the actual, when we get into, how the rest of the season goes, kind of after March Madness, what is the evaluation? What is the projection for him?
Mm-hmm.
And what is that conversation like? Because there just aren't very many people. I mean, Zach Edey can't even do what he did in that game.
No.
But also, if that's all he can do, right? Is he a first round pick? Is he a second round pick? Is he bordering on the lottery? I'm just fascinated by this now. For all the reasons you laid out.
It's interesting too, because that's like there's another big tall guy on his team that is the guy who kind of is like the stretch the floor guy and the offensive big man, which is why the two can play on the floor together. So maybe an NBA team can talk themselves into, well, he just didn't get any, like he was just a dunker spot guy because Filipowski was the big guy that was in the main focus of all of their offense, as in relation to what the big guy is doing to try to get a shot. And Derek Lively is just kind of the anchor on the other end and in the dunker spot. And like you said, he had a dunk and a putback dunk. Those were that's his job on the offensive end, is to get 5 offensive rebounds, create more possessions, get a putback dunk or 2. It's not his job to go out and shoot 14 times like Filipowski did in this game. So maybe a team feels like they see something there that they can get 10 points a game out of him, but I'm just not sure that's enough for you to get drafted before 20th in the draft. Maybe
because I could see somebody talking themselves into it. Not that I would agree with it, because I'm generally with you. That's all I could think about watching that game, is I just really wonder what this is going to do draft stock wise.
Yeah, for sure. Big college basketball weekend. Some good games to put it mildly. Duke UNC was kind of the nightcap that nobody was really talking about except ESPN shoving it down your throat until the end of the day when the game actually started. I know there's an obligation there almost for game day to be at Duke or UNC when Duke and UNC are playing on a Saturday, but the fact that it wasn't at IU I think was kind of crazy, to be honest with you. But it was a nightcap that nobody, generally it's, man, we got Duke and UNC at the end of the night. It wasn't even really like that. It was, oh, right, the 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock slot, that's Duke UNC. Nice. Takes us into St. Mary's and Gonzaga. But nonetheless, when Duke and UNC is not necessarily the headliner of a college basketball Saturday, and then it still delivers a close game basically down to the wire, it's a pretty good Saturday. The last thing I'll say is that every time I watch UNC closely, Pete Nance is not Brady Manick.
No.
And this is not anything new, but I think we either gave Pete Nance too much credit coming into the season or didn't give Brady Manick enough.
Or how about both?
Or maybe it's both.
Yeah.
Because sometimes Pete Nance just completely disappears.
And he's never carrying an offense to give you 25 points the way Manick could.
No. But he also, he was 1 of 10 for 2 points against Duke. And I mean, there are plenty of reasons why UNC is not anywhere near the team that they were supposed to be coming into the season, but that's certainly one of them.
Yep.
Alrighty. It's a Monday. Winners and losers. We'll get to IU Purdue and some of the Big 12 action specifically here in a moment. But first, winners and losers. What do you got?
You already mentioned my winner, St. Mary's.
Man, we're so boring. It's okay. It's okay. I cheated on my loser, so it'll be fun. It'll spark conversation.
Okay. And I was thinking about this kind of big picture as well.
Yeah, me too.
We'll see if we're going along the same lines here, right? So, okay, you beat San Francisco at home. Good job, St. Mary's. And then, of course, Gonzaga. This team is undefeated in 2023. This team now has a 2-game lead in the West Coast Conference. So, they are, regardless of what happens, they are in control. Even, right, Gonzaga cannot do anything to catch them. This is St. Mary's to lose. And then, and this was kind of always the mental hurdle I had. And as St. Mary's continues to win game after game, they're also getting resume help here. And now have 5 top 75 KenPom wins because Oral Roberts isn't losing. North Texas is having a great season. San Diego State's obviously having a really good season. BYU is a borderline top 75 KenPom team. And now you have your marquee win in Gonzaga. It's not only that St. Mary's continues to pile up wins, it's also that their resume just keeps looking better and better because some of those non-conference wins are against those teams that you don't get a lot of credit for beating. And then you look up and you go, well, my goodness, they beat 2 other conference champions who are having really good seasons and KenPom also likes and the metrics also like and are going to be, 12, 13 seeds, not 15, 16 seeds come NCAA tournament time. So that's part of this as well. Just St. Mary's is building. I've always had an issue with how much KenPom loves them, but the resume is getting to a point where you can't argue with it.
Can I ask why?
I guess I just wanted to see.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I'm just that's a very niche thing to be upset with KenPom about.
I guess I just have a mental hurdle with viewing them as a top 10 team in the country, especially before they had played Gonzaga.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, there's a big difference between, what were they, 7th or 8th or something, and 15th. Because they're clearly a top 25 team, and probably, I've got no issue with saying much better than that. It's just one thing to kind of have, okay, they got a good win over San Diego State. The other wins were, like I said, good. It's one thing to beat Oral Roberts in North Texas. It's another thing to beat Gonzaga, to potentially run the table in WCC play. It's now, I'm starting changing my opinion on this the longer it goes. I thought KenPom kind of jumped to that conclusion too early, I guess is my answer.
And still, they're 7-2 in quad 1 and 2 and have 1 less win in those 2 quadrants than Gonzaga and 2 fewer losses. So
yeah,
the metrics...
it's entirely possible KenPom is right and I was wrong.
They're my winner because there's, like you said, I mean, they now have a 2-game cushion on Gonzaga with one of those games already under their belt. And it's not a complete cakewalk because Gonzaga plays 5 of their last 7, 4 of their last 6. St. Mary's plays 4 of their last 6 games on the road, and Gonzaga plays 5 of their last 7 at home. So there's space to slip up, but also I have plenty of faith in the St. Mary's team that is 21-4 and has the country's second longest active winning streak to not stumble coming down the stretch. And they'll probably lose at Gonzaga. I mean, I would bet on them to lose at Gonzaga, but yeah. I mean, it's been a while since they were projected to lose by 1 in Spokane. So
right.
If that tells you anything, of course, that's also a KenPom projection. But yeah, it's been a while since they've had the conversations we're having on February 6th a lot with the WCC is, it's been like a couple of years ago, last year, a couple of years ago, it was San Francisco's like, man, San Francisco and Gonzaga still have to play twice. but it's more of a hypothetical. And then San Francisco loses to somebody that
Hmm.
on paper they shouldn't. And this is the first time that not only does Gonzaga not have a stranglehold on the conference with a month left in the regular season, the team that does have a stranglehold on the conference is arguably better than Gonzaga
Right.
is. And both of those things existing simultaneously hasn't happened for a little while.
Yeah.
So that's why this is different. And that's why that when it comes to the WCC and the regular season race was so important for St. Mary's.
Yeah. Because, usually it's look at what you got with Gonzaga. Look at the depth of this conference, right? You got 2 or 3 really good teams behind them as well. Show respect to the WCC. It's not just Gonzaga. I've always been big on that. This conference is better top to bottom than people give it credit for. But you're absolutely right. This is a different conversation. This is which one of these two teams is actually the best team in this conference, and who knows the last time we had that conversation.
Yeah, 100%. Who's your loser?
Clemson.
Okay.
Scored 54 points in a loss at Boston College, then lost at home to Miami in a week where Virginia also went to Virginia Tech and lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have a jumbled mess where, okay, Clemson has the 10-3 ACC record, so they're winning the conference because of the win column. But you now have 5 other teams with either the 3 losses or 4 losses, so within 1 game in the loss column. And, Brevin Galloway was out for a little bit, but he came back for the Miami game. And they're in this weird spot where, they're kind of putting themselves back onto the bubble with a week like this. Not that they're on the bubble yet. They're still on the right side of it. And then also, if they don't win the ACC regular season title, this is probably the week you look back on as the explanation why. Not that either of these are catastrophic in their own right, but if you want to hold on to your lead with a Duke team surging, with Virginia still there, with Pitt hanging around, you got to score more than 54 points at Boston College, or you got to take care of business at home against one of the other good teams in the ACC in Miami that's right there trying to take the regular season title from you. And so it just kind of this up and down sort of very strange season Clemson is having continues with a bad week that has kind of reopened up the ACC. So they're my loser.
Yeah, I'm as far as I'm concerned, Clemson being the loser is a winner for everybody else, because now we're a month out and there are, Duke is a game out in the loss column, and
Right.
then there are 4 other teams that are closer than that.
Right.
That's spectacular, because quite frankly, I can't think of anything more boring than Clemson running away with the ACC. It's like Webb Simpson running away with the players and winning by 6. Like, 10 days left in the regular season and Clemson's 2.5 games ahead of everybody because they won last night. That sounds horrible. So I think, this is a team that shot it really well in non-conference and early in conference play, and they've kind of taken a step back offensively. They're playing really good defense in conference play, but they're bottom 4 in the conference, and in offensive efficiency, they're 12th in the conference in 3-point field goal percentage. This is a team that is still inside the top 60 in 3-point field goal percentage. So this is a team that ultimately has always been beatable and had done a good job winning, whether it's games that they were just supposed to. I mean, their first 7 games of conference play, the best team that they played was Duke, I guess. And Duke is, better as of late, but still not exactly inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
And the last, 2.5 weeks or so, they lost 3 of their last 6, and 3 of those losses have been to teams that, right, it's either you just need to get a win against Miami at home if you're going to win the ACC, and the other 2 were tough road losses to Wake Forest and Boston College. And so we've kind of reverted back to the median, I feel like, a little bit with Clemson, and they aren't getting, because early in conference play, it was you get a 3-point win over Tech, a 1-point win over Pitt. And so you kind of you won a lot of these really close games, and even in the middle of this stretch, a 1-point win over Tech again, and a 1-point win over Florida State. And this week they weren't able to come out on the right side of things.
Yeah. It's still there for them to take.
Mhm.
It's just gotten a lot more interesting.
They play 4 of their last 7 on the road. Their schedule remaining looks like the following: North Carolina, Florida State, North Carolina on the road, Florida State at home, Louisville on the road, Syracuse at home, NC State and Virginia on the road, and then they finish with Notre Dame at home. Notre Dame, who's fallen all the way to 172 at KenPom, by the way. Just an awful basketball team. Awful. 289th in the country defensively. That's a Power 5 conference team. 289th. It's impressively bad.
It really is.
And I don't know how to word this. But basically my loser is us for having to listen to old as dirt college basketball coaches complain about how things work in college basketball now. Like,
I'm glad we get to address this. I was going to bring it up at the end.
Like can Boeheim freaking retire? Because like if you're like Pitt and Wake Forest and all these other ACC teams, they didn't do anything wrong. They went out and used the rules of college basketball to their advantage, and they are working harder than you are. So stop the whining. It drives me crazy. Roy Williams didn't want to deal with it. He retired. Kay didn't want to deal with it. He retired. Retire. Nobody gives a crap about Syracuse anymore. Nobody cares about your 2-3 zone, and all you've been known for in the last 10 years is finding a way to get to the tournament despite losing 14 times. Nobody cares. Nobody. Retire. You're irrelevant. And you just being sad that you can't do the same thing and kind of wander into the same gyms over and over and over again and get like mediocre at best recruits because they can go somewhere else and get paid to do it. You are like, cry me a river. Cry me a river. Like, it's pathetic. It is genuinely. And Izzo the other day complaining that it's hard to stop Zach Edey.
Yeah.
Like, you should retire too. You're an old bag of bones that does nothing but complain. I'm over the old coaches in college basketball. Completely over it. You don't like it? Leave. I'm so over it. It is pathetic. It is pathetic. Your job got harder. You get paid $40 million a year to do it. Do it anyways. Or pay the 37-year-old assistant to grind in the gyms. They'll go do it for you. But stop complaining. Stop. I'm sorry that Steve Forbes is a better basketball coach than you are. I'm sorry that Jeff Capel is a better basketball coach than you are. But shut up. I'm so over it. And then you walk it back and act like you're holier than thou because you called Steve Forbes at 2:30 in the morning to apologize. Yeah, sure. I'm over it. Over it. And Syracuse couldn't be more relevant, which makes it even better.
My 2 favorite parts of this are, one, that it's one thing to point out something about Miami and the way that has gone down, but to just rope Pitt and Wake Forest in there.
Pitt, who's been like one of the like having a good season, but one of the 7 worst high major programs the last 6 years.
Right. And when you think NIL might and big college basketball brands, you think, I mean, Pitt obviously has a great tradition, and Wake Forest, I mean, they both actually do. But right, we're not talking about Kentucky and Kansas. This is Duke and North Carolina here, right? These are just random ACC schools. And then the other part of it that I always love is, I believe somewhere in the apology was that was never my intention.
Yeah.
Which then raises the important question of, well, what was your intention? Because it seemed pretty clear what you were saying.
That's like me taking a chicken nugget off of your plate at lunch, eating it, and then when you get mad, me eating your chicken nugget wasn't my intention.
Right. That's become one of my new favorites when that comes out in statements that are just so obviously, I mean, where is the lack of clarity, the miscommunication there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
I'm glad you were able to get that off your chest.
I'm so over it. Like I have a list of college coaches who could just disappear into the abyss. And Jim Boeheim is in bold black Comic Sans 256 size font at the top of it. Congratulations. You'll be known for about nothing else other than Carmelo Anthony in your zone. Good job. and complaining when your job got harder. Cry me a river. That's all I've got. Winners and losers. We certainly won't talk about Syracuse anymore on the podcast and winners and losers, because what they do is irrelevant from here on out. But we will continue to do winners and losers as we get closer and closer to the end of the college basketball season and move towards Selection Sunday. We're like 35 days away at this point.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's definitely less than 40. That seems way too close. It's I think March 12th. I think March 12th is the actual Sunday date. So very, very close. That's winners and losers every Monday on the pod. Okay, my heart rate is back is getting back to a more normal heart rate. Whose heart rate wasn't normal? Everybody in the building at IU and Purdue. Absolute zoo. Really cool, by the way. IU and Purdue sold out at Assembly Hall on Saturday. IU and Purdue at Mackey for the women's game also sold out on Sunday, and there were students lining up, wrapping around the building. Matt Painter was there for the Purdue women's game right after losing an away game the day before. So W weekend for college basketball in the state of Indiana. W weekend. But specifically for our conversation, Indiana 79-74 win over Purdue at Assembly Hall. They were up by 15 at halftime, and then things got really interesting. Zach Edey, even in the loss, reminding people that he is, in fact, the best player in the country. 33-18 on 15 of 19. Trace Jackson Davis was spectacular in the first half. Jalen Hood-Schifino had a really, really nice game. And especially in the second half, had 12 of his 16 after halftime, and kind of got the bucket that sealed things. Let's start here before we get into the game. This is really high up there on the list of how fun the rivalry is when both of these teams are good. I mean, this rivalry is always good, and the UNC Duke rivalry is always good, regardless of, that game on Saturday night was awesome and neither team was ranked. But when there's number one buzz, when there's anticipation like Indiana, just in general this season, this rivalry always delivers. And maybe it's the buildings that they play in, because Mackey and Assembly Hall are just elite environments, but this is a spectacular rivalry. Spectacular.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it gets to that extra level where it's not, NCAA tournament hopeful Indiana trying to knock off Big Ten title contender Purdue. It's
right.
Exactly what you were saying. Two top 25 teams, two really good basketball teams. The IU fan base is back, sort of fully invested and confident in their team, as opposed to being just hopeful. It takes it to that whole nother level. That's what you got. Yeah. And props to you. You kind of laid out the blueprint. Right? Trace Jackson Davis did his thing. Hood-Schifino, Trey Galloway were good. IU played great defense. And there you go.
Yep.
Is it going to happen every game? Well, that's the question.
And the answer is no. It's not going to happen every game. But, and on the other side of things, it was, they stopped doubling Zach Edey at halftime. And it was just kind of we're just going to let him score and hope that nobody else does anything. And that's pretty much what you got. He had 15 of their 29 field goals. Braden Smith was 1 of 8 from the field. Fletcher Loyer 4 of 12. And you just kind of let Zach Edey do his thing. And whether it was a timely shot here or there, they were only 6 of 18 from the 3-point line, 10 of 17 from the foul line. They just didn't quite get enough, they being Purdue, from the guys not named Zach Edey to win on the road at Indiana. They almost did. Zach Edey was almost that good that they were able to claw back into this game, but IU doing just barely enough. And Jalen Hood-Schifino, you're right, when those backcourt guys are good, and when Hood-Schifino in particular is good, then IU gets much, much scarier. Right, it just feels like there's so much to handle, and they were so physical. They're generally physical, but they were so physical in this game, especially out of the gates. And that combined with the environment, Purdue looked shell shocked early in the game. They just looked like it was like, wow, this is not the Breslin Center. And it took them it took too long to recalibrate, to use a word that Matt Painter used after the game. It took us until halftime to recalibrate. And at that, but you can't give a team like IU at Assembly Hall 15 points. If you give them 10, then, simple math, you're going to overtime. So, but giving them 15 is a really, really deep hole to climb out of that they weren't quite able to get themselves out of.
Which is where I want to kind of push back on the second half strategy for IU. I mean, it didn't work.
No,
they got thoroughly outplayed in the second half.
Yes,
and
they did.
Edey just got his hook shot whenever he wanted. Yeah, because they stopped doubling, and which is where I get back to the fact that they still nearly won this game is proof that Purdue is the best team in the country. They had an awful first half. They turned the ball over a bunch.
11 times, I believe.
Yeah,
in the first half.
They weren't ready. And like you said, you got everything you needed, right? They didn't play well in the first half. IU got all the role players. Trace Jackson Davis was spectacular. You lay that set of circumstances out, Purdue's not winning that game.
Mm-hmm.
But how often are you going to get that set of circumstances happening? Because just about everything went wrong, and Purdue still almost won. Mm-hmm. And it looked like for a hot second there, they were going to. And then, to Indiana's credit, they made just enough shots at kind of important junctures to never let Purdue, sort of take the lead and take complete control. It was always, they were sort of clawing their way back in, but they never got all the way there. And then, Hutchefiner kind of finished it. That and Braden Smith's turnover, which is.
Did you see Zach Edey's thing?
Yes. This is the other thing I want to. Can I get on my soapbox for a second?
Please.
I saw the word leadership get thrown around a lot with that, and also shout out to our friend Kelly Hallinan for. She's very good at social media.
She's very good at social media. Yeah, she's doing a great job up there at West Lafayette.
I saw a bunch of leadership attached to it, and yes, that's correct. But stopping at leadership does a disservice to what happened on that podium, and it does a disservice to Matt Painter, which is where I want to get with this. Braden Smith also completely owned his turnover, right? He didn't shy away from it. He explained what happened and just said, I think his explanation was basically, it was there and then it wasn't, and I just waited too long to make the pass. Which, he's a freshman playing at Assembly Hall. It happens. And then, Edey takes the microphone and basically says, well, the rest of us were terrible in the first half, and that's also part of the reason why we lost this game. It's not just that one play. Which is a testament to Edey's leadership. But there's also the cultural aspect of this. Which is, leadership is the relationship part. The culture part is the expectations. That stuff happens because that's what's expected within Matt Painter's program. Mm-hmm. It's a credit to Edey, a credit to Smith, right? These guys are bought in. It's why they're so good, even though they're less talented than last season. Matt Painter finds guys who buy into what he's doing. That's why he doesn't care about rankings. The larger point I want to get to with this instead of just going on and on, because I talk about this stuff all day, is just Purdue fans. If this team loses in the Sweet 16, and then you go calling for Matt Painter to be fired again, I don't want to hear the same people who are praising that response from Edey and that behavior within the program then saying you want Matt Painter fired because results aren't good enough. If you want this to be your program, then stop getting on Matt Painter. This is why Purdue is so good. This is why there are expectations. This is why they're the number one team in the country. You can't have it both ways. I'm going to be real upset if we have to go do this defend Matt Painter thing again.
I really hope we don't.
I really hope we don't.
I also just don't think that there's Purdue lost the game because they played this game at Assembly Hall.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I'm not sure there's anybody that can stop Edey to a good enough extent on a neutral site to beat Purdue. I'm not sure there is.
I'm not sure there's anybody that can stop Edey, period. Purdue beat themselves.
Right. Well, that's my point. Is that and I would argue that Assembly Hall beat them.
That's certainly part of it. Yeah, sure.
but I'm not sure. Like Purdue is rock solid almost all the time, which is why the first half was so surprising because they were not rock solid.
Yeah.
And Painter was very transparent after the game that he said like they knew that this was going to be different. Like we talked about it all week, and we were really physical in practice and that kind of thing, and trying to replicate something so that they weren't quite so shell shocked. And it was, and it just wasn't quite enough. Whatever they did, it just wasn't quite enough. Which is, it's impossible, right? It's like trying to replicate guarding Zach Edey. It's impossible.
Right.
But the point being that I'm not sure that there's any team in the country that can do enough. That can stop Zach Edey to a large enough degree to beat Purdue on a neutral court. Because if Purdue can almost claw back into this game, then I'm not sure. Then they're going to be able to claw back into anything, or just not be shell shocked against anybody on a neutral site. So we'll see. But the thing that's different for me this year versus all other Purdue teams is that you cannot, like, you can't depend on their best player having an off shooting night. Right? I mean, like,
Carson, the idea of that happening is laughable. Yeah.
Right. It's just not going to happen.
An off shooting night is 50%.
Right. Like, he goes 10 of 20 from the field, and you're like, man, he didn't really have it tonight. 10 of 20, 24 and 16. Man, I mean, Painter has literally said that in a press conference this year. 24 and 16, he was just all right tonight. Yeah. And he's like, right. He was just all right. And he still had 24 and 16. And in years past, right, one, they played defense way better than any other Purdue team has played defense.
Yeah.
Two, like Jaden Ivey is a high volume, low efficiency scorer. That's what he does. Mm-hmm. And the teams that had your Dakota Mathias, help me,
Vince Edwards,
and who was the other? Who's the point guard? Who's the point guard? PJ Thompson. Like that team would also, like, Isaac Haas was of course great, but like those teams didn't function like this one did.
No.
And so I really hope that we don't have to have that conversation. I also think that it's ludicrous for any program, fans of any program, after your team wins multiple games in the tournament, to ask to call for coaches firing. I think it's crazy town.
And I'm pretty confident it's a minority of Purdue fans.
They're loud though.
But you and I both know they exist. Yeah.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. I'll take Matt Painter, please.
100%. Yeah. It's more than leadership. It's what Purdue is. It's why they're great. Right? That's the expectation. Matt Painter expects his players to behave that way, and they buy in because they get it. It's not just Edey. It's a commentary on the larger picture. And you saying you want Matt Painter fired is saying you don't want a program that runs that way.
Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll add here is that, if I'm Trace Jackson Davis, I'm eating, sleeping, and breathing Domantas Sabonis until I begin my NBA career. That is the path for Trace Jackson Davis. His stats this year and Sabonis's last year at Gonzaga are almost identical. Now Trace has 0 outside game right now, and Sabonis tried to sprint. He took 15 threes in his last year at Gonzaga. Trace has taken 3 in all 4 years at IU. So it would be a big leap to turn Trace into the semi outside threat that Sabonis is at this point. He's taking a 3, just 1.1 threes per game right now in the NBA. But the way Trace passes, the way Trace plays defense, the way the decision making he has, that high pick and roll, make a good pass at the free throw line. He's physical, he's tough. I think there is a path for Trace Jackson Davis to have a successful NBA career. Yeah. But I think that's where it needs to start. And of course, he's ultimately a undersized for his position in the NBA forward. and he'll need to expand his game. He'll need to, but I think it's possible. And I think like he does everything else so well that even just like even the opposing team having to have like a half thought that he might shoot it and might make it would do wonders for him in the NBA. But every time I watch him play, he just does too many things well to at least not to at least not have a very real chance of having a prolonged NBA career. That's
just extend it to the elbow, right?
Yeah, just give me something outside of the paint.
Right. Just have
even if it's a Duncan, you're right. Even if it's a Duncan like elbow jumper or something, he doesn't necessarily have to be a three, but just give me something.
Yeah, just to make people think when you set a pick what is going to happen.
Right.
Right. To be able to stretch it that way. Yeah. No, I love that comparison. That's really good. I'm right there with you that somebody needs to give him a shot, and he's a special athlete on top of everything else, and also life's going to get a little bit easier when every team's not trying to double and triple team you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
There's that part of it too.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty, Big 12 games. I have a couple of them here. Would you like to start with Texas and Kansas State or Kansas and Iowa State?
Let's start Iowa State, Kansas.
Iowa State, 68-53 win over Kansas. And, we did all of this stuff where we talked about how Kansas's offense had come back to life. And in this game, Jalen Wilson had 7 of the team's 17 field goals in 40 minutes. He was the only player for the Jayhawks, save for Joseph Youssefu, to have more than 2 field goals. Youssefu had 3. He was the only bench scorer to have a field goal. Guys not named Jalen Wilson in the starting lineup combined for a grand total of 18 points. Going to be hard to win basketball games when that's the case. Iowa State wasn't fantastic offensively in this game either, but Kansas was really tough. 6 of 23 from the 3-point line. Of course, some of that has to do with Iowa State, and the fact that this game was played in Hilt Coliseum. Mm-hmm. But just about everything that we had talked about last week about Kansas went back the other direction. And thank the Lord for Jalen Wilson, because if he hadn't played well in this game, then this would have been like a really, really ugly, like 68-45 type of final score. And but either way, Iowa State controls it. They were up by 12 at halftime, just kind of coasted to the victory in the second half. 16-6, 7-3 in the Big 12. What say you?
Yeah, I believe this was the worst offensive performance in a Big 12 game in Bill Self's tenure.
Sheesh. We've had a couple of those this year. Like was it the TCU?
Yeah, TCU.
The TCU loss was like the second worst loss against in Fog Allen in the Bill Self tenure. We had a couple of those this year.
Yeah, and you laid out the Kansas side of this I wanted to, which was, they went back to having nobody help again, and Jalen Wilson had to do all of it. On the Iowa State side, maybe not spectacular, but Trey King has a good game off the bench. Everybody kind of chips in. It's sort of what they do this season, right? They didn't even need somebody to go give them 20. They just need everybody to go give them 10, and that's exactly what they got. The other thing I want to mention real quickly here is, by the way, Iowa State is finally at full strength now. First time all season. Because Jazz Kuntz was clearly rusty in this game. But it's very easy to forget with how good they've been that Jazz Kuntz wasn't playing. Jazz Kuntz was an important part of last season's team and gives you a rebounder, size, the ability to stretch the floor, another guy who's already familiar with the system because he was there last season.
And so not at St. Bonaventure like everybody else.
Right. And now you get to put him back in with everything else that's already developed.
Mm.
This just...
And to be clear, like that's like that point serves to the idea that Iowa State could get a little bit better, not that they were in final form here. Like he was mostly irrelevant in this game.
Right. Oh yeah. He was rusty. Yeah. He just couldn't get a shot to go down. Yeah. Right. No. That's my point. Is that this is the floor here, because if he gets going and they find a way to implement him with everything else that's already going well, they're just really good in a way that, and so much more consistent than last season. There wasn't too much new in this game. We've talked about the issues Kansas is having. We've talked about the things that makes Iowa State great. You saw it on this game, so I wanted to focus on the new development here, which is now Iowa State is finally at full strength with everything at TJ Otzelberger's disposal.
I will pump the brakes a little bit here since it's just their third win since January 14th. We're 3-4 since January 14th. So I'll pump the brakes a little bit here. Like, not a ton, but a little bit. Like, I still have major concerns about their ability to, like, win multiple games in the NCAA tournament. I'm still not totally sold on that.
As in,
like, not
get
completely.
To a Sweet 16 or get to a Final Four?
Get to a Sweet 16. Not totally sold on that. They've scored 60, 59, 61, and 68 in 4 of their last 7 games. That's not good enough.
In the country.
Sure, but this is still also the 62nd best offense in the country. I'm just saying. And I know that me saying anything negative about Iowa State creates like a allergic reaction for you. Like, I get it. But, like, they only won this game by 15 because of how poor Kansas was offensively. Like, 68 is not a ton.
No, they could have been better.
I'm just saying. Like, do they deserve the credit and the consistency that they had last year that they have this year that they didn't have in years past? Absolutely. And is this team better than any of those other teams that got off to a much better start than they were expected to? Yes, absolutely. I will just hold on to, like, I'll just because yes, they've lost. Yes, they're playing in the worst conference, best conference in the country, but they lost to Missouri and Texas Tech in their last 2 games. Like, those are that's the worst team in the Big 12 and a middle of the pack SEC team. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That I am like that. We talk about Tennessee having duds. Like Iowa State has duds 53, 56, 60, 59, 61 in 5 of their 6 losses. That's not good enough offensively. I'm just saying that I'm not totally sold on their ability to win multiple games in the tournament. I'm just not. Especially if they end up playing like a solid 6 seed in the second round.
Sure. And the other thing too is they don't know how to deal with the press. That has a lot to do with this as well.
I like Iowa State. I promise you. I'm not dogging Iowa State. I don't want to overreact to a inconsistent Kansas team getting beat by them at Hilton Coliseum. Yeah. That's all.
And to me, this is just reinforcing what I mean. If they can win 2 games last year, now I know they had some help in terms of how that schedule went. If they could win 2 games last year, this team is so much better offensively.
I would agree with that.
My concern is that's why I asked Sweet 16 or Final Four. Yeah, because I'm not convinced they have the offense. And it's the same thing with Tennessee. Are you worried about Tennessee getting to a Sweet 16 or are you worried about Tennessee getting to a Final Four?
I would put both of those teams in the same category.
The same category? Okay. I have confidence they're going to get the first 2 against lesser opposition because they're going to put themselves in a good spot seed-wise. My worry is more that Sweet 16 game, the Elite 8 game.
Fair.
I agree with your assessment, though. Yeah, I'm not picking them to make the Final Four. I don't care if they win the Big 12 regular season and the conference tournament. I'm not picking them to make the Final Four.
Fair. Yeah, I am. If I'm going to give Tennessee like that level of crap and Virginia that level of crap, like I have to at least sprinkle some crap on it.
Yeah, Virginia's the best offensive team out of those 3.
Yeah, I just meant kind of in the past, like over over the last few years.
Yeah, no, it's not a system that's set up for NCAA tournament success. Yeah, I'm with you there.
Anywho, they are super fun and you know they will be a tough out. Even if you have to beat them like 51-49, like they're going to make you score all 51 of those points to beat them, even if it's an absolutely atrocious offensive night. But I can't wait to see them we need them to play Tennessee. That's what we need. And like, that's the last thing I was going to say is that it will probably, like, would I default to Iowa State making the Sweet 16 at this point? Yeah, probably. Like, if you made me choose, but they're also one of those teams that I would be very curious as to which teams they get in their bracket.
Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if they get a team that is pretty good on like like if they end up with Creighton as their like
Oh yeah.
6 seed, or if they stumble
Yep.
down the stretch and end up with them as their 5 seed and they're a 4 seed kind
Yep.
of thing,
Sure.
then I'm really concerned because that's a Creighton team that could play defense with them
Oh yeah.
and is, when healthy, better offensively.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Anywho, shouts to Iowa State though. Are they alone atop the Big 12? Is that correct?
No, it's Texas.
Oh, it's Texas. Sorry. God, that other Texas, Kansas State, 69-66 at the Little Apple. No, sorry. Forget that. 69-66. This wasn't exactly an offensive firepower house either. You got 30 points from Tyrese Hunter, Marcus Carr, and Timmy Allen. That's helpful. But really, the charge came off the bench. Christian Bishop had 14. Serge Ibaka, my liege, Serge Ibaka. Serge Ibaka Rice had 14 because he got to the free throw line 9 times. But hey, whatever gets you there. And they beat Kansas State 69-66. I mean, like, there are a few things that I feel like we've been more spot on about this year than when Kansas State doesn't get like all world performances from their guys, that it's going to be tough to beat the best in the Big 12. Now, they've proven that they can, but it's a lot easier when Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel combined for 50 than 26 on 21 shots. Yeah. The margin of error just gets much smaller. And apart from Desi Sills, who kind of seems like he's about it off the bench almost every night. He had 11, 5, and 3 in this game as the team's second leading scorer. That's about all you can count on a nightly basis offensively. And even Desi has some nights where he doesn't do a ton in terms of the production offensively. And this was, among other things, another example of that.
And I mean, they had this game and then they just didn't.
Yeah.
But
that's what I'm talking about when it comes to margin of error.
Yeah.
It's like it's so small.
Right. And Texas just became a really good offensive team in the second half after being awful offensively in the first half. And the Kansas State performance was never good enough to beat good Texas. It was just they got bad Texas in the first half and great Texas in the second half, and it wasn't anywhere near enough. Yeah, Christian Bishop made a big difference, right? Because you know what you're getting from Serge Ibaka. But getting a second guy off the bench when you're not getting the best day from your starters is really important. 2 things I want to sort of get to specifically. Marquise Noel has more turnovers than made field goals or assists in his last 2 games.
That's not good. At least from what I've heard, that's not great.
And I was looking back at his turnover numbers. Of course, he's going to have some because he has the ball in his hands all the time, and he's playing against the best defensive conference in the country and the best conference in the country. But it's gotten bad these last 2 games, and Kansas State is not hanging with Texas, with Kansas at home, as in Fog Allen, when that's the kind of production you're getting from the point guard spot. And a guy that, you need to be giving you 20 plus and 8 assists in order for you to be at your best and for you to be able to beat these teams, unless you get great performances across the board from everyone else and Keontae Johnson goes for 25. Mm-hmm. That's the other part of this too, is it's not just that they're not giving you 40, 50 combined every night. It's that Marquise Noel is really struggling right now. And then the other thing, so here's Texas back in the top 5, in control of the Big 12, just doing their thing. And I'm not really scared of any of the teams around them at this point. Right? Are you scared of, if you're Texas, are you scared of Kansas State? Are you scared of Kansas? Are you scared of Iowa State? Are you scared of TCU, who's injured?
No, and it's something I've been thinking about recently, that I've never seen a conference so deep that doesn't have a team that I'm all that scared of.
Yeah, and then the other one is Baylor, who's playing much better.
Right.
Still have some questions, though. Not what they're used to be defensively. Mm-hmm. So on that, right, Texas is looking in terrific shape. The interesting thing, though, right? So Texas goes to Fall Allen in hours as we're recording this, and finishes out the season with Iowa State, Baylor, TCU, and Kansas again. So even though I feel really good about where Texas is at, and I think Texas is the best team in this conference, and I'm confident in that, this is still going to be a really interesting end of the season because of the way the schedule plays out. If Texas drops a game somewhere in between, they're not supposed to, maybe somebody can make a run. If Texas wins at Kansas and then enters this 4-game stretch without losing again, or maybe just losing once, they could win this thing by multiple games. Depending on just the way this sets up, I'm very excited about. So, Texas, just from a Big 12 standpoint, Texas's schedule has not been quite as difficult because they have all of these games kind of sandwiched in at the end. So I wanted to bring that into the conversation as well.
Yeah, and nature of the Big 12 that games that are not supposed to lose are at home against 14th at KenPom, West Virginia, away at Texas Tech, who's also top 70, at home against Oklahoma, who's also top 56. It is an absolute gauntlet, and then you get to the point where you get to play those 4 teams in the season.
Right. Yeah.
Also, can we talk about that West Virginia is 14th at KenPom?
Yeah, I was stunned by that when you said that.
14th? They're higher than TCU and Kansas State.
I was going to say, yeah, they're higher than some of these teams at the top of the conference. Yeah. I'm telling you, KenPom's strange this season.
Are any of the Big 12 teams elite?
Texas.
You would consider Texas elite?
I had him as one of my 5 title contenders. I'm banging the drum on this. I'm all in.
Okay. That's fine. I just think it's because typically there's there's a team at the top of a conference this loaded that is pretty undisputed, elite.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure this conference doesn't have an undisputed elite team. You could have the opinion that Texas is elite. Yeah. I could just as easily tell you why Texas is not elite.
Sure. Yeah, it's a personal preference. Yeah.
Right. And I just think that's interesting because there are 2 Big East teams ahead of the highest ranked KenPom Big 12 team. There's an American team, of course, there's a West Coast Conference team. There's 2 Pac-12 teams in the top 10. There's only 1 Big 12 team in the top 10. It's part of why the conference is so good, because there's no team just winning so many more games than anybody else. But I just find it to be an interesting dynamic that none of those teams are hands down elite, even though that conference is elite.
Yeah.
And anyway, I just find that interesting.
And here's my rationale for that real quick.
Sure.
You look at the rest of these teams, right? Kansas, we've talked about this idea that sometimes they just don't have offense outside of Jalen Wilson. Kansas State, we've talked about how reliant they are on 2 players, one of whom is in a stretch of committing turnovers and not playing particularly well. Iowa State, this would be a potentially different conversation had they not thrown away, what was it, a 17-point lead at Texas Tech? They were running them out of the building, and then they lost, right? That's also a possibility there. And Baylor struggled early, has gotten better. They're probably the team I have the 2nd or 3rd most confidence in at this point, but I want to see a little bit more. The only team I feel who hasn't been up and down, who has just been good, is Texas, right? You're going to lose some games. It's the Big 12. But I haven't really ever been left scratching my head about what just happened with Texas, the way I have at some point pretty much every single other good team in this conference. That's my rationale. That if you can navigate the Big 12 this way, and you're back up to the AP top 5, you deserve to be in the conversation for elite.
And I think part of that is because when you look at their efficiency numbers, that Texas is kind of the only one. Kansas is kind of in that conversation, but Texas and Kansas are the only 2 that have top 30 numbers in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Mm-hmm. Right? Iowa State is great defensively, and they seem to get shots when they need them, but they're 62nd in offensive efficiency. Baylor is one of the best offenses in the country. They are not any good defensively.
Nope.
74th in the country in that category. TCU is 41st in offensive efficiency, despite being 15th in defensive efficiency. And Kansas State is not in the top 25 in either category. They're 25th in defensive efficiency, but 37th in offensive. So I think that kind of can play into it as well, right? Is that some nights when they get enough from their not so great end of the floor, then they can beat anybody. But on a night where kind of those holes show themselves, they kind of go up and down.
Yeah. And I'm also still, I kind of just removed TCU from this conversation because of the injuries.
Sure.
Right. You're just not hanging with the other teams in this conference when you don't have probably your two most important players.
Sure.
So I'll have things to say about TCU come NCAA tournament time, assuming they're healthy. It's just a little bit of a conversation because that's kind of where they're up and down, Cam. I mean, they've had a couple bad performances, but a lot of it was, right, they're in this bad stretch because they're just a different team without Mike Miles. So,
but they also still have days where they struggle to score anything, of meaning, Even
Texas is easily the most well-balanced team.
Virginia.
Easily. Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. You got anything else?
I was going to bring up Jim Boeheim, but I think we covered that one. So,
I'm having a really hard time rooting for the Memphis Grizzlies right now.
We've had some off-air conversations about this. Is there anything new, or just?
Well, you saw what happened on Sunday, right? That there was a report that John Morant's peeps basically confronted the Pacers after the on-court alteration, like in the players' parking garage after the game. The only thing I'll say is this: is that one, like that kind of stuff, that's not culture, that's not toughness, that's pathetic and embarrassing. If it went down like that, and I genuinely have great respect for the Athletic and the reporting that they do, so I don't have any reason to suggest that those things aren't true.
I saw Ja went after him, I think.
Yeah. I mean, of course, right? What are you going to say? Yeah, we did that. Right. I mean, it's like Boeheim. That wasn't my intention. But the thing, like the reason I loved the grit and grind Grizzlies so much was that there was just one, I would much rather root for a team that nobody else cares about. Like I got people just for no other, like last night someone sent me a screenshot of them betting against the Grizzlies and winning, and all it said underneath it was I hate the Grizzlies. It's like, great, thanks. Like and nobody used to do that. Nobody used to do that because nobody cared about the grit and grind Grizzlies except Grizzlies fans, and then the other teams who had to come into the FedEx Forum and play them. But you just never heard about anything. Like the worst thing that ever happened in the grit and grind Grizzlies era was that Zach Randolph got caught with a bunch of weed because he is a rich man, and I'm sure like many NBA players smokes weed, and like it's the same thing as like buying a full tank of gas instead of only $20. If you can, you might as well, right? So I'm such a big fan of when things, like I never want to hear about what's going on off the court unless it's like the NBA Day of Giving and you're shooting hoops at the local Y, right? Like I'm just finding it hard to root for the Grizzlies nowadays, and that sucks. So
it does.
Thank you for coming to the other end of my TED Talk on this year Jays for Days podcast.
You and I are both big on this idea that sports are a lot more fun, and fandom is a lot more fun when you feel like you have something bigger that you're supporting, cheering for. And this is why I fall in love with just specific teams. I think it's where you and I come down on Purdue. It's not that either of us have any allegiance to Purdue. It's just that we're just fans of teams that do, and programs and people that do things the right way. That carries a lot of weight with both of us. So I definitely empathize with you.
Thank you. That's all I've got, though. That's all I've got. I've come down from the rage clouds a little bit, and we'll see. Maybe it's blown out of proportion a little bit, but it's also one of those things that when I read it, I was like, that doesn't exactly stun me, which is also frustrating. Anywho, you got anything else?
No.
All right. Please subscribe to the Jays for Days podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at Jays for Days Pod, YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, all of those fun things. Like Josh mentioned, Texas at Kansas tonight on Monday. Marquette is at UConn on Tuesday. Couple other we got 4 top 25 matchups on Tuesday. Rutgers at Indiana, NC State at Virginia, and TCU at Kansas State. And then on Wednesday, anything fun there? Not especially, but we'll find something to talk about. All of this to say, we'll have something to talk about on Thursday, and we'll meet you back here then. Thank you so much for listening to this edition of the Jays for Days podcast. I'm Josh. He's Josh, and we will see you later.